Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Steve Down and this is my guitar. If you've just joined us, we are pretty much at the end of our study on 4 on 6 by Wes Montgomery. It's a pretty giant tune and we've got all the way through his 9 choruses. We've looked at the head as well, and today we're looking at some of the techniques he uses to comp under Tommy Flanagan's solo. I have got my friend Matt Carter to play the piano solo on it. Not the same as Tommy's, but I've used Wes's comping. I've transcribed that so you can have a go at that yourself, and it actually does fit underneath what Matt's doing, which is great. And then I've unpacked some of the techniques that Wes is using in his comping underneath. It's a really, really good thing to learn how to comp under somebody's solo. So make sure that you follow along and you try and get as creative as possible with some of these things. You don't need to be really, really complicated. I have got a little bit fancy with some of the examples in here, but you don't have to be that fancy. You can take just a couple of things and use it within your comping underneath someone else's solo to make it sound that little bit more creative. But remember that when you are comping, one of the major rules is to be listening, not just thinking where you can stick in your fancy licks. So this is just some examples, but make sure you've got your ears attuned to whoever is soloing, and try not to get in that way. Space is always best when you're comping underneath someone's solo, so always listen out. Less is more. And if you can latch on to some of the rhythmic things that they're doing or some of the melodic things, that's all the better. But really just kind of staying out of the way and just being a supporting role rather than trying to kind of step over and take the limelight. It's always the best option. Before we get into that, I just want to say a big thanks to my patrons. I have taken a bit of a break over Christmas, so I just want to read out all the names of the people who've signed up, and there are a lot of you. So thanks to Randall, Mikhail, Harvey, Don, Alejandro, Dick, Glenn, Graham, Jonathan, Scott, Elaine, Mark, Mike, Aaron, Tim, Vincent, Alan, Ziofan, I think that's how you pronounce it, Jeffrey, Nimrod, Matt, Simon, Dom, Judith, and Alison. So tons and tons of you. Thanks so much for signing up to the Patreon. If you want to get all of the transcriptions from not just this series, but any of the series that I'm looking at on my YouTube channel, and also all the backing tracks, chord scale arpeggio packs, the link is at the bottom of the screen. And if you go there, then you can get everything that you see on screen here and some extras on there as well. So yeah, thanks to everyone who signed up. I've actually bought myself a fancy new microphone, an SM7B, which is hopefully giving better sound than my previous microphone. So I bought that with the funds that I've got from Patreon. So thanks to everyone. You've managed to make the audio quality much better on here now. If you don't want to sign up to Patreon, but you want to show some support as a one-off, then there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes below. And as always, just hit the like and subscribe button and the bell so you get updates when I release a new video. So other than that, let's get on with the show. So let's look at the first 8 bars. Okay, so Wes's solo, it comes off the back of this approach in octaves, coming out the back of his own solo. And he lands on that C, which is a really unstable note that he does need to resolve. It's unstable because of the fact that he's resolved onto the note of C and the chord underneath is G minor. So he does need to resolve that, and he does that by using this movement from and it's, I mean, technically it's an A minor 7 and then moving down to a G minor 7, but he wouldn't have been thinking that technically. It's literally just above, so it's just an approach chord, which we will look at in a second. But the main thing that he's doing here, starting with this little approach chord, is a series of what we call syncopated chordal lines. Now, syncopation, the definition of syncopation is basically where you place the accents on the weak beats rather than the strong beats. So you're actually displacing the feel of the bar. So rather than going 1, 2, 3, 4, you can actually be going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and so like a reggae ska kind of skank rhythm is syncopated. But it's not just that. It doesn't have to just be on the off beats. It could be anywhere in the bar where you've replaced the weak beats with strong beats, so you're actually emphasizing the weak beats in the bar. So something like this. So what Wes is playing is so you can hear he's accenting on the and of 2 quite a lot, and also the and of 4. A good bar in question on the transcription is bar 182, where he accents on the and of 2 and also on the and of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and. Okay, so he plays on the 4 as well, but on the and of 2 and the and of 4. And he's providing the accent by making the notes staccato on there, so it just brings them further out. So this is something you can do in your own playing. So here's an example of me using Wes's approach in my own solo, and this is me using that syncopated idea with a bit of repetition over the top of the first 4 bars. Here we go. So let's take a look at the next 8 bars. So in the next 8 bars, we see Wes starting on a weak beat on the and of 4. Using a little bit of repetition there. I mean, he's basically just strumming the chord. And this chord we will come back to later. It's a minor 6 chord. So a minor 6 chord is basically a minor chord, but in this case in G minor, it's with the added note of E in there. So you get this really nice kind of tense chord in there that does kind of feel like it needs resolving, but it's quite mysterious in a way. It's a really nice chord to know. This is a nice voicing of it here. And Wes is playing this kind of repetitive strumming line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. And in between that, he's got this little approach octave onto the 9th, the note of A, and then at the end of that, to echo that, he's also got this approach into the B flat major 7. So you can see that at the end of each 2-bar phrase, he's got something rather than just having this strumming minor 6 chord all the way through. Now this little bit at the end is kind of a good bit in question. Now it does appear all the way across the accompaniment to Tommy's solo, but we've got these kind of approach chords from underneath and also above, and then we've got this what I call oblique approach chords, which is basically chords that don't really necessarily make any sense when they're put together. So we know what the chord that we're heading to is, but the one that approaches that final chord doesn't actually make any sense, but still sounds good. So I'm calling it oblique approach chords. So here's those options. And you can see that in this sense, at the end of that little 4-bar phrase, Wes is using a bit of an approach from underneath. So he's using that semitonal approach from underneath. Obviously, you could do from above. You could go backwards and forwards, starting on the note that you actually want to get to, like that, which he does do later on. In the final bars, we see a lot of these approach chords, so watch out for those. But this is quite an easy way of creating a bit of tension and resolve, and also just making it sound quite jazzy on there. So you can approach from above, from below, or you can have this kind of oblique thing that's going on there as well. Now, where Wes uses this oblique example is actually in bar 4, so rewinding a little bit, where he goes from this G flat minor 7 chord to a C minor 9 chord. Now, there's no real kind of theoretical reason for this other than it just sounds good. And I've echoed that in my example, which you'll see in a second. The reason why it sounds good is because we've got some voice leading in there. So when we go from this chord here, these notes, E, A, and D flat there, the D flat at the top goes to a D, the A goes to a B flat, and the E goes down to an E flat. So it does sound actually really good as a tension and resolve device. So make sure you take a look at that. Here's an example of me using all of these techniques, not necessarily in the same place that Wes is using them, because he does use them all over this particular approach, but I'm using them over the kind of car crash of 2/5s. The 2/5 in B flat, 2/5 in A flat, 2/5 in G, and then the 2/5 in D flat as well. So that's where I'm using it. It is quite tricky, it is quite pacey, so do slow it down. Use the, if you go into the cog mechanism, which is down here somewhere, then you can actually slow the whole thing down whilst remaining on the same pitch. So use that if you need to. Okay, so let's take a look at the next 8 bars. So the bit that I wanted to zoom in on in this section is his use of the minor 6 chord. Now, we've already seen the use of the minor 6 chord elsewhere, but here he actually adds a major 7 onto the top of it. So we've got this sound. Okay, so you've got your 6th note there, which is the E, the B flat, which is the major 3rd, the D, which is the 5th, and then we've got our F major 7 here. So it's a minor major 6 chord here. Now, there are many different spellings of this. The one that I like to use is the minor major 6 chord. Now, if you don't have that F sharp in the top there, then it just becomes just a minor 6 chord. Remember, it's a minor chord with the 6th note from the scale added to it. Now that note is E here. Now the 6th note that we're adding to it is from the major scales. This is not a flat 6 chord, this is a minor 6, so it's a minor chord with the 6 added into it. But obviously the one that we're looking at has the added major 7, okay, onto the top of it, which makes it sound even more tense and even more mysterious. So a good voicing here is this one. Okay, now he doesn't actually have this thumb over the top for it in the bass. I'm just showing you that to give you the tonic of it. He actually just uses these top 4 strings here. Lots and lots of syncopation and some approach stuff as well. Okay, so that's just literally on one chord. Like I said, a little bit of syncopation, a little bit of repetition, a little bit of approach on there. It's a really, really useful chord to have. You can see that he does resolve it a little bit later on when we get back into the second round of Car Crash 251s. And it sounds a lot better because he's following the chord sequence there rather than just staying on this tense chord. So that is a form of resolution in itself. This chord here is really well worth knowing, so make sure that you've digested it, that you know it in a few different positions. And here's an example of me using this chord over a portion of the tune. Okay, let's look at the last 8 bars. So in these last 8 bars, we've got some really interesting stuff. The thing I want to zoom in on, though, is the diminished chord run that he's using. It's not necessarily him thinking in diminished theoretically. All he's doing is he's moving a chordal line up and down in minor thirds, which gives the illusion of the diminished kind of sound and does give you that altered kind of sound with it. So anything basically that you play, if you move it up and down in minor thirds, so that's up 3 frets or down 3 frets, you'll get a diminished, altered kind of sound. So it's a really easy way of doing that without having to think too much about the theory behind it. Where Wes uses it is right towards the end. So here's an example of me using that now. Again, it's quite a speedy one. I've added in some extra bits and pieces in there. So do slow it down if you need to, and take a look at adding it into your own solos. Remember, it doesn't have to be anything too fancy. It doesn't have to be what I've done here. It could be as simple as... But make sure that you do give it a try and you do try get creative with it. Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks for following along if you have followed along. This was the last lesson in the series. I am going to post in the next couple of weeks a full transcription of 4 on 6 right from the beginning through the piano solo. I haven't transcribed what he does over the top of the bass solo, and I haven't done the little battle between the drums and the guitar at the end there, but I do move on to the head at the end there. So we've got all 9 choruses of the solo, and then some ideas on how to comp underneath a piano solo as well. So that will be coming out in a couple of weeks. I really strongly suggest that you try some of these options underneath a solo, albeit that a piano or sax or bass, over the top of this particular piece. It's really important to learn how to comp and comp well and creatively. So do give these techniques a try and have fun practicing. And I'll see you on the next one. The next series is going to be Mule by Kenny Burrell, which will be coming out in about a month's time. So keep your eyes peeled on my channel for that. So have fun practicing, and I will see you next time. Bye.